Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia SBDC's webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's webinar is Mind Mapping, or Brainstorming on the Web. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, web and mobile strategist, author of Solo Mo Success, Social Media, Local, and Web Small Business Marketing Strategies Explained, and president of W3 Consulting, a digital business and strategy training firm helping business owners learn why and how to use the web, mobile, and digital technologies for greater marketing and managing impact. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window, and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me here on the Beyond Google Marketing and Managing on the Web series. Today, as Tracy said, we're going to be discussing mind mapping on the web, and just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. I'm here, and Tracy's manning the questions panel, so just ask your questions in the little questions tool, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have, allotting for time. Then if you have questions after the webinar, feel free to go ahead and tweet at us at W3 Consulting, hashtag it Beyond Google. I'll know the context and I'll be able to answer the questions there. And of course, I recommend everybody to go ahead and follow at Virginia SBDC, and that will allow you to be able to learn about upcoming webinars and other kinds of resources that the Virginia SBDC network is providing to the businesses, the small businesses there in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So let's talk about our agenda today. Our agenda today is that we're going to talk about mind mapping, and we're going to talk about what a mind map is, because that's really important, and why we would want to mind map in a business. Why would your small business want to use mind mapping? Primarily as a brainstorming tool, but we're going to talk about other uses of mind maps as well. And then I'm going to give sort of a brief overview of some of the mind mapping tools that exist out there, the ones that I've used primarily on the web, and showing you how to sort of manage around those things. I think there's some really great opportunities to use mind maps, and these web tools are really, really powerful as it relates to it. So let's jump right into it and really talk about what a mind map is. So what is a mind map? I like to define a mind map as a visual representation of a connection of thoughts. So what that means is that you can create an outline, for instance, and an outline is in essence also a visual representation of a connection of thoughts. It's in a hierarchy that is a little bit different than, say, what a mind map is, but if you want to think about a mind map as sort of like a family tree, you probably have seen a family tree. You have a lineage starting off at the top, and it branches down through the connection of spouses and then children and so on and so forth, right? So you have parent, siblings, children, all the way down, and it sort of branches out. Well, that's a mind map in essence. It starts off with one particular concept, what I call the key, that just because of my programming days, some people call it parents, some people call them main thoughts. Either way, you have this central thought. I'll call it the key for purposes of our discussion today. So you have this key. In the image that you're seeing on the screen right now, you can see that the key is computer science, the black blob that's in the center there. And I'm going to show you several iterations of mind maps as I talk about what a mind map is. So there in the center you have the key. All of the other items, what you can call nodes, are basically then other thoughts. You're attaching these other thoughts to the central thought. Now, they can be any thought, as long as they're related to the central thought. And that's how you're basically mapping out your thought process. So it gives your brain a visual representation of what you're thinking. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit more about why mind maps work when I get into the next section, so I'm not going to get too much into that. But here we could just understand some of the key terms here. So central thought is the key, or you can call it the parent thought, main thought, whatever. And then all of the other secondary nodes are what are called child thoughts. Children are the thoughts that fall outside of the central thought. Okay, so those then become their own parents. Again, following the family tree concept in genealogy, the child of one parent becomes the parent of another child, right? So those are sub-thoughts, or basically new additional thoughts added to the central node, okay? So in this particular case, you can see they have orange, red, blue, and green. If you can't read them on your screen, it says theoretical, technical, applied, and practical under computer science. And those are parents, those are child thoughts, but two of them, the practical and applied, the two right side items, are parents themselves, because they have each 3 and then 2 respective child thoughts. Okay? So children of the main thought become parents of their own children or child thoughts. Okay? So as you can see in this slide, mind maps can be drawn in pretty much any way you want. There are a couple of guidelines that I'm giving you here, but in general, mind maps are a fluid means of producing your thoughts, your visual representation of a connection of your thoughts. So don't think too much about structure as much as it is about getting the ideas out of your head in a visual way. So in this particular case, the main thought here is pretty unclear to me, but the person who created this, I'm hoping, understands what the big question mark is in the center of their mind map. And what they've done is they've created 2 or 3, 5 points on their central mind map. You can see they actually drew their central thought, and I'm guessing that it says wholeness or something like that on the top area of that circle. And then they have free, Aranya, Dave, or something like Dave written there around the concept, and they've spread the ideas out by lines as opposed to circles. So the first mind map showed these bubbles that were, sort of coming off as child thoughts. Here they chose to use drawing and lines. In this one, this person's chosen to, again, draw a little central thought in the center of their Map Myself mind map, and then they use these branches, what look like veins, arterial veins or something like that, and you can see the thicker veins that come out of the central thought. The key there are thicker, and then they get thinner as they broaden out to the child thoughts of those parent thoughts. Okay, so they've also numbered them. So in this particular case, you can see that 1 is intro, 2 is create, 3 is branches, and so this person's decided to number their parent thoughts and then writing out the child thoughts from there. So they've given themselves a little bit of structure within it. This one is actually my own mind map, a mind map I've created in a tool that I'm going to talk about later. And you can see that it's a little bit more structured in essence. As you can imagine, someone who is far more structured in thinking is going to like a tool that's far more structured in presentation. And so me being much more of an analytical mind, I tend to like things in this more hierarchical view. And you can see that my key thought is GTD, which stands for the productivity methodology I've mentioned here before, Getting Things Done by David Allen. And so here goes the GTD methodology in the central thought. And then I've created these branches off to the sides of them. And those particular thoughts cover dashboard, workflow, the weekly review, calendar, agendas, focus, and of course reading on my Amazon Kindle. And then those of course have their child thoughts independent of the central thought, but they're all related. Okay, so you can see that clear hierarchy of where things flow. In a lot of ways, this is somewhat like a flow chart in the sense that you can actually use this for question and answer. So you can have a key thought and then have questions as the primary parent thoughts. And then the answers to those become the child thoughts and so on and so forth. Okay? You can also do a timeline. So you can have the mind map start on one end of the screen and just keep answering the questions of what happened next, and then placing a time period on that next thing. And so going forward, you basically have a linear mind map that would be only on one line, potentially if it's only one time horizon. If you had multiple time horizons, you could create multiple mind maps on the same page and therefore show those various lineages. That's probably easier done on a piece of paper than it would probably in a mind mapping tool, but you could probably do it. Okay? So I just wanted to show you different kinds of mind maps so that you had an idea of what mind maps could look like. Again, there's no real rule that says you can't put a new key thought on the same mind map. It's probably not the best idea, but it's going to work. If it works for you, it works for you. One thing that you'll notice about the mind maps in terms of guidelines is that these structures that are created, at least on the web, don't usually allow you to be able to connect two different pieces of the same mind map to another node on the network. Okay? So to explain that better, say that I'm looking at this particular node here called workflow. Well, notice that I can't connect workflow to dashboard here. They're both parent thoughts, and they've gone off in their own direction. So they can't get together. They can't be connected to one another. All right? And that's a limitation of certain types of software, but it also allows you to be able to do some interesting things when it comes to brainstorming, okay? Because you want to produce new ideas. You don't necessarily need to connect ideas to one another quite yet. And honestly, if I wanted to, here under workflow, I could easily have created a dashboard and created some ideas about how dashboard was connected to the workflow. And vice versa, I could create a workflow on the dashboard side and then show how the workflow was connected to the dashboard in that sense. It generates more ideas instead of less. And again, in brainstorming, it's really important for us to want to create more ideas instead of less. All right? So next up is really discussing how mind maps work in a business and why would we want to actually use them. That starts off with our brain, and it's a topic that is sometimes difficult for people to really understand. So I wanted to very much simplify the idea and show you the brain. So this is a snapshot of one hemisphere of your brain. Okay, so we all have a singular brain, but it's broken up into different parts. And it's very important for us to understand that we very infrequently work all of the parts of our brain. So when we're writing on a piece of paper, we're using particular parts of our brain. Not just one part of our brain, but different parts of them all at once are basically being utilized in order to produce the writing on the page. There's motor function of being able to use your hand. There's thought processes going on. There's visual, spatial, and analytical thoughts that are happening, that are bouncing around inside your brain. Well, the red part on the screen right now. So if you're looking at this, if you're looking at the screen on the right-hand side of the image, that would be where your forehead is. Okay, and so that would be the front of the brain. So where your forehead is, the prefrontal cortex, and as you sort of go around the circle to the back side of the brain, right before you get to the back side of the brain, you get this area called the precuneus. And the precuneus is called the precuneus because it is precuneus. And that back portion, the latter part of the brain right there, following along, is called the cuneus. Okay, so the cuneus is there, and then you have the precuneus. Well, what does the precuneus do? Okay, well, the precuneus is the area of the brain that handles a whole bunch of things, and it's so still unknown about what else it does. But this particular area of the brain sits between the medial lobes, so it sits right in the middle of the brain, right there in the center of all those pieces. And what it does is it actually handles some fine motor function. It handles drawing. In essence, all of the functions that are required for you to be able to draw, it's involved in that. It also is involved in something called the default mode network. Basically, when you think you're at rest, your brain is on fire. And when you think you are highly focused on something, your brain is actually using very little resources. So think about it this way. When you are focused on something, your brain puts energy into the area of the brain that it needs to in order to function. When it goes into what you believe is a rest state, it actually turns on all of these various places to do other work. Basically, the problem solving of your life happens when you are not thinking about it. So the more you focus on a particular problem to come to a solution, it's when your brain goes back into that default mode network that you start to understand the problem, because it starts to do pattern recognition, and it takes into all of the information that it currently already has, all those kinds of things. Well, we're understanding now through brain science that much of that work is actually done in this little area called the precuneus. And so we really need to pay attention to the fact that our brain needs basically a workout. It needs a good exercise. And all of that is to say, by mind mapping, you're exercising a different part of the brain than you normally do when you are highly focused on solving a problem. So when we try to highly focus on solving a problem, it ends up being this former part of the brain, basically the newest part of our brain we call the neocortex, right, this prefrontal area. That part of the brain goes ahead and kicks into gear, all right? But that's only one part of your brain that's getting an exercise. When you go into drawing using mind maps, the precuneus kicks in, and it's like doing another workout for your brain. So really, really important for us to, infuse in our daily life the use of different kinds of tools like mind mapping in order to go ahead and exercise all the full potential and capacity of our brains. So I not only recommend that you utilize mind maps, but also helping invest this technology, this technique, into your staff and the other people who work with you in your small business, okay? So important to understand that. All right, next up is the first technique that we primarily use mind maps for is brainstorming. That's when we have an idea and we want to be able to create new ideas based on that. Most often than not, people talk about the idea of brainstorming from the idea of bringing together a group of people in the same space and then throwing a bunch of ideas either up on a board or on a piece of paper or that kind of thing. Well, what science has told us of late is that really brainstorming doesn't work in group settings. It doesn't work as well, at least. So if you're going to brainstorm, it's really important that you do a couple of things. One set of scientists, they call it brainstorming, where they get, they do have a particular different technique of writing down ideas and submitting them to someone who then puts them together into a mind map. But in this case, I just like the idea of taking ideas before you get everyone into the room. So I like the idea of getting people into the room for getting ideas onto, some master sort of template and then working through what the best ideas are. But most often than not, what happens when you try to do initial brainstorming in a session with people is that group dynamics kicks in, which means that the strongest personality in the room becomes the dominant force in choosing what the best ideas are. Someone with a bad mood or a negative attitude is going to potentially corrupt the idea of staying positive and throwing out bad ideas and good ideas right along with one another. All it takes is one person to tell an individual who has lots of ideas, this idea is not so great, and then all of a sudden the rest of their ideas are blocked because now they're emotionally attuned to the fact that their ideas are not welcome. So when it comes to brainstorming, a really good tip is to basically take each of the individuals who are going to brainstorm an idea, even if it's just you, as one person, and mind map them. That is, what's the problem? What's the thing that we're trying to solve? What's the new idea we're trying to come up with features for or benefits to? And make that your key. Map out all of the ideas that you have available, and then once you've gone ahead and done that mind map, then you share it with the group leader or whomever the person is who's going to be handling the brainstorming session. So all of the individuals get to brainstorm separately. They come together, and the group leader or the brainstorming leader then gets the ideas and culminates them potentially in, say, a larger mind map or a list of the ideas. And now all of those ideas are put together into one big pool, preferably a mind map, and then shared with the group. Now the group can sit together and see all of the ideas on the table and start to work from that point of reference, as opposed to walking in the room and having to produce ideas and also having to do the functions of vetting ideas to make them viable as opposed to not. So we really need to think about brainstorming as two independent functions. The idea of creating the ideas separately, individually, and then coming together and talking about those ideas and coming to a final decision on which ones are viable. So we really want to be able to place those two ideas together. If you're more interested in the business brainstorming concept, there's a wonderful HBR, Harvard Business Review article on it. Just Google it. You can find the HBR article. It's called Brainstorming. I think there's even a video out there about it as well. Next up is problem solving. A big thing that people frequently tell me is that problem solving really isn't something that is brainstorming, and brainstorming and problem solving are really the same thing to me. In essence, you are taking the central key and making that your problem and then producing ideas to solve it from the child thoughts or the parent thoughts that you're creating from the key thought. All right? So what that means is you take the central thought, that's your problem. How to fix the door, right? The door is broken. How to fix the door? Well, the next ideas that you're going to spread off of the key thought are potential fixes for that. You can replace the door. You could take the whole door off and you can just replace it. So one of those parent thoughts could be replace door. One of the others might be to mend the door. Well, what are the ways in which you can mend the door? Well, what's actually broken on the door? Is there a corner chipped? Is the door handle broken? Is there a hole in the door? Did someone bump a desk into it and put a hole in it? Well, all of those things can be written down, and eventually you come to a final resolution. Now, your problems can be very simple, like how to fix a door, and they can be very, very complex, which is install a new, start a new company. I believe that there's a good article out there on either Forbes or Open Forum where Chris Brogan, the author of Social Media 101, talks about his idea of basically mind mapping the start of his own new company and how he started a whole training and marketing company just on mind mapping. So use mind maps for problem solving. Idea generation is another one of those things that, again, it sounds like brainstorming. I tend to hold it in the idea of it, but idea generation for me is more of a capture tool. So I have a mind map that is just a section for ideas for when they come to me in my business. So ideas, like I said, happen when we're not thinking about them. That is, solving problems or problem solutions, resolutions happen in those off moments. You're taking a shower and all of a sudden you're like, hey, you know what? That accounting problem that I have, that's the solution. Or you're going for a run, or you just sit down to dinner with your family, and all of a sudden some epiphany comes to you and you're like, that's the problem and that's the solution. I got it. Well, that's because your brain has gone into a rest state, but really, like I said before, your brain in a rest state is really on fire. It's doing all sorts of things. When you're not thinking, it's thinking. And so that's when ideas are going to come to you. And that's when I like to go to my idea generation or my idea capture mind map. Those are places where I can just, on a branch, make a new child thought, capture the idea, and then go on with my day. Because I don't want to forget the good ideas and the great problem solutions that I have come up with. I want to just be able to capture those ideas and move on. So idea generation means that when ideas come to me, I can capture them someplace. And mind map is a really great place for me to do that. So think about how you can use the mind mapping tool to, whether it's in paper, where you keep a little piece of paper and you just create mind maps for capturing ideas, but also using these web tools that I'm going to talk about in a little while to have them available to you to just capture ideas when they come to you. Because you just don't know when these ideas are going to come to you, so you might as well have a tool to capture them when they do. Next up is project management. In our last webinar, we talked about project management and really the functions of it and then some of the tools that come along with project management. And something that people don't realize is that you can use a mind map to basically project plan and manage an entire situation. A whole project can be done in mind maps. So you basically, the project name or the project goal becomes your key of the mind map, that central thought. And then each of the areas or phases of your project become one of the parent thoughts. So then you just create all of your parent thoughts, and then you can keep statuses. You can map out each of these sub-phases or the sub-goals of those particular areas. And then all you need to do is pay attention to the central thought and then move your way out in terms of where are each of these particular phases of the project. You can then, in most of these web tools, archive or delete one of the nodes once it's done, or you can just mark it complete. You can color it, like I've done in my mind map before I showed you. It was colored, so each of the areas of the mind map actually has a distinct color, and I can gray out the text of the things that are done and then move on to the next items. So you can actually use those as an indicator, a visual indicator of where a project is. So if you're thinking about using mind maps fully in your business, you can totally do it using it for project management, using it for all kinds of different areas and operations within the business. So if one of the projects you're working on is a marketing project, you can talk about planning the project, implementing, and then maintaining or reviewing and briefing yourself on what happened in that particular marketing campaign. Well, you can have those three parent thoughts, coming off of the central thought for the marketing campaign name, and then go ahead and just manage the entire thing right within a mind map. I know there are a lot of project management folks who use mind maps effectively for managing projects like this, and with the web tools I'm going to be showing you, you can actually share and collaborate with folks, with team members using these kinds of mind mapping tools. So you can not only be sharing the information with them, but also collaborating with them on it so that they're able to update you on those things. And you can control that. You can share with them just an image or just one particular version of the file. They can make updates, and then you can basically pull in the ones that you want or not. So really, really powerful tool when it comes to project management. So if you haven't watched the project management webinar yet, go ahead and watch that, and then come here and see how a tool like this can be utilized sort of backward compatibly with project management in the management, sort of overview management of the actual projects. So really, really great there. All right. So next up, I wanted to talk about some of the tools that exist there out on the web. And the first one I'm going to talk about, it has sort of a partner tool that I use it with, and just because these are the two tools I use, I'm going to talk about them a little bit more because they make a lot of sense for how I work, and I believe for how a lot of other small businesses work. So the first tool I wanted to talk about is called Mind42. And Mind42 is a free tool. It's completely free, and it's built by a German company, and they just have this site. They're mind mapping aficionados, and it's absolutely fantastic. Now, I'm breaking one of my own rules here, which is that web tools that I use for my business should have a business model, but for the most part, they don't have a business model. They're just doing it for free. They host this tool, and it's really fantastic. The one really good part about this particular tool, which is what doesn't worry me about using it, is that should they ever decide to shut down, and I did have to download all of the mind maps, the 100+ mind maps I probably have in their system, they export into open source formats that I can use in a particular tool that allows me to be able to do that. And I'll show you that in a minute. But let me just go into the tool itself so you can see what it looks like. So this is Mind42, and you can see here that it's I'm just going to turn that off for a moment. So you can see here when you come to the site, you have the option of signing up for services. Of course, it's free, and then you have the ability to go ahead into the mind maps and start adding whatever data that you'd like to. So in this particular case, you can see that they have an open database of published mind maps. So mind maps that people have publicly available to them, and that you can browse through and sort of see how other people are using mind maps, which is really useful when you are trying to sort of figure things out. I know these images are pretty small, so I'm going to try and load one or two of these so that you can see. So you can see that they do have banner advertising, so that's probably what helps support some of their operations. But I don't really care about the banner advertising. It doesn't bother me anyway, but it is there. So you can see this particular person has a mind map called Music Types, and the tool itself allows you to be able to center the mind map, which it already does when it opens up, but you can drag basically the mind map anywhere you'd like to. So I can drag it to almost any point and see it, and if I click on this little center button, it goes ahead and centers the map for me to the parent or the key thought. All right, so it brings me back to the key. If I ever want to shrink all the nodes into their smallest parent thoughts, I can just do that by this collapse all nodes button. So if I click on it, you can see that it collapses all of the parent thoughts into their most basic form. So it closes all the child thoughts in, and now I have the most succinct version of my mind map, which is great because then I can look at it, see what's going on, and work in one particular area. So in this particular case, if I wanted to, I could work in the reggae area and only focus on that area. And then if I wanted to, I could explode it again and make it fully, full size again and browse around the entire thing. Now, if it's too big, I can always go in here and zoom in and zoom out, and so it allows me to be able to go ahead and make the mind map smaller or larger if I need to. Now, the reason I'm showing it to you here is because this is almost universal functionality with almost all of the mind mapping tools that I'm going to show you going forward, so I'm not going to do this in the other ones, but you can see the basic premise of it is being able to zoom, collapse, and expand the nodes, and of course centering the mind map. Then you can go into full screen, which means that you can take over your entire screen to be able to see the entire mind map as well. All right. When you're in a mind map, you have the option of a couple of things when you're logged into the system. You can see I'm not signed into the mind map here, but if I were signed into the mind map, I would then have the ability to do a couple of things. In this particular tool, and in many of them, you're able to actually embed images. So in this particular case, I can add a drawing that I've made, an image from somewhere that I've taken off the internet, if I have rights to be able to do so. And I can also write text. I can embed web links. So I can embed a website in a particular node, or a child thought, that is. I can write thoughts. I can do all kinds of things to these. So in this particular case, where this person has punk, they have an image for punk rock, right, which makes a lot of sense. It helps visually cue them into what this particular area is. And they've decided that the greatest artist is this particular band. And so they have some text that they wrote about it. I'm guessing they pulled this information from somewhere. So you can add basically a note to a particular node. And they've also attached a web link. So in this particular case, they added a YouTube page for this particular band, I'm guessing. And so you can see that it pulls in a little thumbnail of the band. And voila, you've got this really rich mind map that gives you a lot of information in very little text and time, okay? So you can see the power of being able to do that kind of thing. And say if this was a big project, and now that I just reviewed the punk rock section of the project, I can shrink it. And now I can go on to the next one. Well, what's going on with the country music section of the project? I can go down that rabbit hole, deal with those issues, close out that item, and then go on to the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. So you can use it all kinds of ways in your business in terms of not only from the brainstorming perspective, which is going down each of these items and coming up with ideas, but also project managing on the other side. What needs to be executed, what has been done, who's in charge of it, and where's the status of that. So really, really powerful tool for being able to do that. But you have all of these options for rich movement of it. As well as Mind42, one of the great things that I've always used it for is the ability to collaborate on the mind map with other people. So in this particular tool, and the others have different means of doing it, but in this particular tool, all you have to do is just add a collaborator. They have to create a free account, also in Mind42, and that's actually where the name comes from. It's actually Mind for two, basically for two people. So it allows you to be able to collaborate with a number of different people, not just two people. So you can add collaborators, and then they can all live synchronously edit a mind map together. So if I'm on the phone with a client and we're working on a particular issue, we could just pull up a mind map, and together we can actually problem solve and also talk about all of the ideas that we're capturing in a particular meeting session. So if we're training and we're talking about particular things, the client could be capturing both what they're learning, and I can be capturing what they are having trouble with, so that I can track that in the future with them for future training purposes. So it can work really well for a lot of different situations, and Mindmap42 is a really competent tool for doing that. It then also exports into various formats, and one, of course, is a picture format called a PNG, which is a lossless image file. That means that you can expand and shrink it without losing the resolution of the image to a point. And so you can export it in as an image, and you can export it into some of the standard formats for the import, basically export and then import into other mind mapping tools. And so I want to talk about the other mind mapping tools that are out there. So the next mind mapping tool that's out there is the tool, let me get this up here, I'll probably not switch back and forth. It's called FreeMind, and FreeMind is a free software, an open source project, and the software itself is at freemind.sourceforge.net, and I'm going to take you over to it just so you can see what it looks like, but it's not really all that pretty. You can see here, it's just free mind mapping software. So it's no cost, and it allows you to be able to download it. It comes in almost every platform that you would think of. So, Windows, Mac, OS X, and Linux versions, and so on and so forth. And so you can go ahead and download it in whatever format you would like to. And Mind42 actually works in exporting to the FreeMind format. So this is not web software. So this is the one tool that I'm going to talk about today that is actually not on the web. But it allows you to go ahead and download the mind map that you've created on the web and use it in this open source tool so that you can go ahead and manipulate it locally. So if you're not going to have web access, say for the next couple of hours or the next day or so while you're traveling, you can go ahead and download the mind map from Mind42, open it up in FreeMind on your local software, and it works across platform, so doesn't matter what system you're using, as long as you have that file, you can continue updating it. And then when you get back to your office or back to the internet, you can re-upload that edited FreeMind file to Mind42. So Mind42 has the ability to then import those .mm files, the mind map files, into the system, and it creates a new mind map. It doesn't overwrite the old one, but it creates a new one, so you can just delete the old one or rename it as old. And then you have now the updated version in Mind42. So really powerful for you to be able to use the two tools in Confluence when you're not going to have web access to Mind42. Okay, so the next one that we're going to talk about is called Coddle, and Coddle is, I'm not going to go to the slides because I have them up here on screen. So the next one is Coddle, Coddle.it, okay? And so Coddle is a beta tool. You sign in using your Google account, and it's a pretty simple tool. And you can see that it works similar to using the sort of line structure that I showed you in one of the earlier ones. You basically create your key thought here. They've chosen lasers as their key thought, and then they have different parent thoughts that they've shot off of that main one. So they have different ideas. But you can see here, this thought here, they've chosen to use laser as an acronym, and then it's developed its own thing. So lots of different ways in which you can use the tool. Again, Coddle.it. It works collaboratively. It has pretty much all the same tools that Mind42 does, and it pretty much has the same concept of being free and giving you the ability to share with people, export the images, and really go back and forth in that concept. One of the things I didn't mention was that Mind42 also exports to .opml, and so if anyone uses that format for creating outline structures, it does that. So if you know what a .opml is, then go for it. You can use it. If you don't know what it is, don't worry about it. So Coddle.it is also one of those tools. It's just, it's plain, it's simple, and it works. So you can collaborate with folks. You can get the document reviewed and edit. So in this particular case, it shows you what the document looked like in different versions. So it does versioning, so you can see a revision history. So that's one thing that Mind42 doesn't have. So you can see that in that particular case. And then it has the ability to track accountability. So when you are in the section, it shows you who is actually responsible for changing what. Okay, so you can see what people have changed and so on and so forth. So Coddle is a great tool. You should check it out in Confluence with Mind42 and see what you like. This next one is called Mindmeister, and Mindmeister is actually one of the only tools that costs anything that I'm showing you today. So Mindmeister has several different versions, but in this particular case, the Pro version, the one that would be for small business, comes out around $5 or $10 a month or something like that. And again, it's collaborative mind mapping. Okay? And so if we just go into the live demo, just hold on a second. I'm going to go silent while the tool loads. I'm presuming the tool is loading. Let's see here. There we go. No? Well, the demo doesn't seem to be working. But anyway, the point is that Mindmeister is very similar to the rest of them. It comes with a couple of features that if you are planning to use it and paying the price of it, hold on one second. It's loading. I don't know if it's going to cut out my audio. Okay, now that it's loaded. So the reason I bring up Mindmeister as opposed to Coddle or Mind42 is that with Mindmeister, it also works offline. So by utilizing the tool, paying for the tool, it gives you the opportunity to go ahead and use the mind maps offline in the same function. So you don't have to toggle back and forth between downloading from Mind42 and using FreeMind. It's not a problem that I particularly have, but if you find that that's troublesome for you, you can just basically pay for Mind42, and then you have the mobile functionality, the mobile app, and you have the desktop app, and they work offline. So you can use both in Confluence. And so that's the one feature that sets it apart from the free tools. And then second is that Mindmeister also has the ability to go ahead and export to Microsoft Word and I believe PowerPoint. Hold on, I'm going to check. Yeah, so it's Microsoft Word and PowerPoint exports. So if you really need to be able to get a Microsoft Word or PowerPoint file from your mind map, Mindmeister does that out the gate. Okay, so that's really powerful in terms of being able to connect to those. I don't have a problem embedding a PNG or a JPEG from Mind42 into a Word document or into PowerPoint, so it doesn't really bother me, but some people want that connectivity with Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, and so if you need that and want that, go for it. Mindmeister has that as well. And then there's a new player to the market called MindMup, and MindMup is another one of those free tools, and so it's like Coddle and Mind42, except it has a wonderful connecting piece, which is, say I wanted to create a new map. Well, it gives me the opportunity to be able to create a public map. I don't want to create any public maps, so that would probably be not something that I want to do on a regular basis in my business life. But then I have the ability to go ahead and create a map in Google Drive. So if you use Google Drive or any Google products and you have a Google account, this allows you to save it directly into Google Drive and help manage sort of all of your documents from a central place. So if you're trying to centralize your documents and not have yet another place for these files to be, this is really great because it basically saves the file into Google Drive as you manage it. And then if you want to share, you're sharing it through Google Drive. So you're actually using the security layers of Google Drive as opposed to this particular tool. So you're actually creating a whole new layer of protection for the business data through using MindMup. So I like that. It's a really cool concept, and it goes ahead and allows you to be able to do all those things. Again, once you do go ahead and create it, This one allows you to be able to create an offline map as well, but there are limitations to that. So in this particular case, this is, of course, in an offline mode, and I would have to then save it someplace and or upgrade to a paid account in order to be able to save it in their system. Okay, so in this particular case, we have the central key thought. You have the ability to be able to collapse the nodes and edit the nodes, add images, set up the items sort of more in a subtree concept. You have lots of really cool concepts, and it also has extensions. Extensions are different kinds of tools that you can add to the MindMup, interface to give it more functionality. So MindMup is a fantastic tool. I've played around with it a little bit and had a really good time doing that. It has some really fun tools also, like doing storyboards. So if you're trying to storyboard an article or storyboard a video, you're planning on doing some YouTube videos for your business, well, you can storyboard using MindMup. And again, all of that can be saved directly into your Google Drive account if you're using the online version, and saved up there directly. So really powerful tool. It looks very simple and elegant, but it's very, very powerful. So those are the tools that I wanted to go over. I'm a little bit ahead of time, which is just fine. But if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions now, or we can close up early. I'm going to hand the microphone over to Tracy to answer any questions that you might have, and then to close out.
Great, Ray. Well, right now we don't have any questions. So I'll go ahead and give my closing out spiel, and if anybody's typing in questions, they can go ahead and do that, and we'll go ahead and answer those on the back end. How about that?
Great.
Thanks to everyone today for participating. Today's webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow you'll be receiving a follow-up email on the webinar. There'll be an evaluation link in that email. Please help us continue to improve our training by taking the time to complete the evaluation. If you want to do the evaluation now, I'll put that link in the chat window for you. Our next webinar is August 7th, and it's Create an Email Community with Google. We do have a couple of questions, Ray. The first one I'll go ahead and I think I just answered, that we will have the archive of this webinar posted about a week from now so that you can view the parts that you missed for the person that got to us late. Can you give an example, Ray, of how you would use mind mapping?
Sure. So one of the things that I use mind mapping for generally is article production. So whenever I'm writing an article, I follow a particular method where I start with brainstorming, then I go into a research method, I organize an outline, I draft, edit, and then I disseminate that article. And so for pretty much from the idea of brainstorming the topics for articles down to the idea of mapping out each individual article, they are separate mind maps. So let's start out with the idea that at the beginning of the year, whenever you decide that beginning of the year is, so say today is the beginning of my year, I am going to map out the themes and then the general periods on which those themes are going to cover. So the general one that people sometimes start with is a season. So I'll have 4 different themes for the year, covering, of course, 3 months each. And then within that, I'm going to decide that those are broken down into months, those are broken down into weeks, and that leaves me with about 52 weeks that leaves me with exactly 52 weeks a year. So I know that so I know that I'm going to have 52 posts or 52 ideas for my blog at the end of my mind map. Central thought, or my key, is going to be blog topics. Maybe it's the name of my blog. Then I'm going to outline my next 4 areas. The next 4 child thoughts are going to be those ideas, the 4 themes of my year, and then from there I'm going to start mapping out the monthly themes. Maybe I'll decide on monthly themes, then I'll decide on individual topics. What that allows me to do, though, is it allows me to start taking myself into small, more incremental spaces for being creative. And what we know is that creativity happens inside of a vacuum. It happens inside of a structure, okay? It doesn't happen by thinking big and broadly. It happens when you start to narrow your mind into smaller and smaller compartments. So if I start in spring, as my first area of the year. Then I work my way into the month of April, smack dab in the spring. Maybe that's going to make me think about the cherry blossom festivals there in the Washington, D.C. area, and that's going to make me think of a specific topic relating cherry blossoms to my particular business, product, or service. Okay? So it gives me that very granular view, but I wouldn't get to that idea by thinking of the blog title and then getting to April. I needed those little jumping points, those lily pads to get me there. So that's one example of how you can use mind maps, is taking a central broad thought and keeping the central thought, breaking it down into smaller nuggets so that you can get all of those ideas captured in one master area.
Thanks, Ray. We don't have any other questions, so I guess we'll go ahead and end the webinar early today. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Again, thank you, Ray, for being with us today.
Thank you.